pipes were cooking over a little fire outside the tent. I could see the expression of total amazement and fear when they suddenly realized they were surrounded by 6 men with automatic weapons. The 2 campers were marched back into the nearest truck and driven away at high speed. I don't know what the story the 2 campers were told. Maybe the park rangers told them there was a dangerous fugitive in the area, or maybe they said there was a forest fire. I don't know. I just know those 2 campers were out of there before they knew I hit them. The 2 choppers circled the lake. Then they landed in a small clearing at the far side of the lake at the same time. It was more than a mile away, far even for my hawk's eyes in the slanting light of the afternoon, but I could still see what came out of those helicopters. Out they leapt, one after another. 7 feet tall, the most dangerous-looking creatures you'll ever want to see. Foot-long razor-sharp blades raked forward from their snake heads. More blades at their elbows, wrists, and knees. Feet like Tyrannosaurus Rex. The shock troops of the Yerks. Hork-Bajir warriors. Chapter 8. Hork-Bajir! The first time I'd seen them was at the construction site. I was still fully human then. It was while Visser 3 was taunting the fallen Andalite. The 5 of us had been cowering behind a low wall, while Hork-Bajir had been within a few feet of us. The Andalite told us they had once been a good people, the Hork-Bajir, that despite their fearsome appearances, they were a gentle race. But the Hork-Bajir were all controllers now. They all carried the Yerk slug in their brains, and they were no longer gentle. I made a sharp turn back. I had to warn the others. I passed over a group of the park rangers and swooped low enough to read one man's watch. My friends had been in Mort for more than an hour. Great. Low on time, and the Hork-Bajir are here. I soon spotted the wolf pack, still trotting along resolutely, never tiring, pausing only for Jake to pee. I dived toward them. Just over their heads, I pulled up suddenly. They yelped and scampered around. Jake bared his fangs at me. I came to rest on a decaying log. Instantly, as if on command, the others started fanning out around me, encircling me. The 5 of them were acting like a wolf pack surrounding prey. In their own way, they kind of reminded me of the Hork-Bajir. "Hey, it's just me, relax," I said. No answer. Jake snarled a brief command at one of the others. Wait a minute. 5? 5 wolves? Jake, who wasn't really Jake, leapt at me. Whoa! Wolves don't usually hurt humans, but they will definitely eat a bird when they're hungry enough. And one thing you don't ever want to see is a hungry wolf, yellowed fangs bared, golden brown eyes glaring, fur bristling, coming at you. I flapped my wings hard. The big male wolf went shooting past. Barely. But the rest were all around me. I flapped again and got airborne, but just a few inches. I was skimming wildly over the pine needle carpet, flapping for all I was worth, with 5 determined wolves hot on my tail. Swoom! I caught the tiniest headwind, but it was all I needed. I was up and out of there, while the wolves yowled and snapped their powerful jaws in frustration below me. 10 minutes later, I found a second wolf pack. This time, I counted 4 wolves. Still, I was cautious. "Is that you guys?" "Who else would it be?" Marco asked. "Don't ask," I said. "Look, we have trouble." I flopped down to a low branch and rested my wings. I was still a little shaken up from my close call with the wrong wolves. "There's a lake just a little way ahead. It's crawling with park rangers who aren't really park rangers." "Yeah, I thought I smelled water. And humans," Cassie said. "How do you know they aren't real park rangers?" Jake asked. "Because real park rangers don't carry machine guns," I said. "Plus, they don't hang around with Hork-Bajir." "Hork-Bajir?" Cassie asked shakily. "You're sure?" "Oh yeah," I said. It's kind of hard to confuse them with anything else. The park rangers were clearing out the area around the lake. They hustled some campers out of there real fast, at gunpoint. Hort Bajir, Margot said with distaste. I really don't like those guys. Rachel asked, This lake, is it in the same direction as your big invisible ship was moving? It's in a perfectly straight line, I said. Whatever that ship was, I'd bet anything it was heading for that lake. And judging by the way you say these park ranger controllers and Hort Bajir are acting, it's on its way again, Margot said thoughtfully. I'll tell you one thing, I said. These guys all look like they'd done this many times before. You know what I mean? Like this was a real common routine. They had it down. We don't have a lot of time left in Morph, Jake said, but it would be a shame to miss the chance to find out what this is all about. I say go for it, Rachel said. You always say go for it, Margot muttered. If just once you would say, hey, let's not do this, it would make me so happy. You have about 40 minutes left, I told them. The lake is about 5 minutes away. Okay, let's go, but in and out fast, Jake warned. Just enough to see what's going on. They took off, with Jake in the lead. Remember, act like wolves. Yeah, so if anyone sees the three little pigs, don't forget to huff and puff, Margot said. I went airborne again, but this time I stayed close by. Park rangers just ahead, I said. Yeah, I can definitely smell them now, Rachel replied. And hear them too. Okay, look, wolves would try to steer clear of humans, Cassie advised. So a little slinking would be perfectly normal. They moved in a cautious circle around the phony rangers, but I could see that the rangers had spotted them. They tensed up, then relaxed when they saw it was just a wolf pack minding its own business. I decided to get some altitude. Unfortunately, since there were no convenient thermals, I had to flap my way up. I was a few thousand yards high, able to see my friends in the lake, when I felt its presence again. I looked up. The invisible wave, the slight ripple in the fabric of the sky. It was there. It was moving slowly overhead, even more slowly than before. And then, as I watched, it was invisible no more. Chapter 9. Don't act suspicious or freak, I called down to the others. But look up. Oh my God, Rachel gasped. It's huge, Cassie cried. It was huge, but the word huge doesn't really begin to describe it. Have you ever seen a picture of an oil tanker? Or maybe an aircraft carrier? That's what I mean by huge. Compared to this thing, the biggest jumbo jet ever built was a toy. It was shaped like a manta ray. There was a bulging, fat portion in the middle, with swooped curvy wings, one on either side. On top of the wings were huge scoops, like air intakes on a fighter jet, but much bigger. You could suck a fleet of buses through those scoops. The only windows were in a small bulge at the top. The bridge, I realized. Focusing on it, I could see the shadowy shapes of the taxons inside. But mostly the ship was just big. Really big. As in, it blocked out the sun, it was so big. Suddenly, out from behind the ship, a pair of bug fighters zipped into view. We had seen them before. They are small, for spaceships. You couldn't park one in your garage, but you could land it on your front lawn. They looked like metal cockroaches with two serrated spear-like protrusions pointed forward on either side. I have bug fighters up here, I called down to the others. A pair. Who cares about bug fighters? Margot asked. They're nothing compared to that whale. The bug fighters are circling the lake. I guess they're looking around for trouble. Try not to look like trouble, Jake advised dryly. I did my best to look like a normal, harmless hawk, doing normal hawk things. But the main ship was unbelievably intimidating. I mean, nothing that big should be floating in the air. Suddenly, one of the bug fighters went shooting right past me, low and slow. I could see in the window. Inside was the usual crew, one Hork-Bajir and one Taxxon. The Taxxons are the second most common type of controller. Imagine a very big centipede. Now imagine it even bigger, twice as long as a man. So big around, you couldn't get your arms around it if you wanted to give it a hug. Not that you'd ever want to give it a hug. Taxxons are gross, disgusting creatures. Unlike the Hork-Bajir, who were enslaved against their will, Taxxons chose to turn their minds over to the Yeerk parasites. They are allies of the Yeerks. I don't know why, and I probably don't want to. The bug fighter shot past, not interested in me. The huge main ship sank slowly down toward the surface of the lake. Are you guys seeing this? It looks like it's going to land on the lake. Are we seeing it? No. We've totally missed the fact that a spaceship the size of Delaware is hovering in midair. Marco, of course. It's incredible, Rachel said. Incredible. You know, I hate to be a pessimist, Marco said, but when I look at that thing, I get a bad feeling about our chances. 4 hounds and a bird versus a ship the size of Idaho. A minute ago, it was just the size of Delaware, Cassie pointed out mildly. What's it doing here? That's what I want to know, Jake said. They had reached the shore of the lake and were prowling along, looking like wolves should look. But they were also glancing regularly up at the massive ship. I worried a little that some controller, human or Hork-Bajir, would notice that they were paying a little too much attention. You guys, watch how you act. The Yeerks will be looking for any animals that act strangely, I said. They're on the lookout for Andalites who can morph. He's right, Marco agreed. Jake, start peeing on things again. Very funny, Jake said. Then something began to happen. Hey, look! From the belly of the ship, a pipe began to lower into the water, then a second pipe, and a third. They're like straws, Cassie said. They're drinking. I could hear the sucking sound. Thousands, maybe millions of gallons of water being sucked up into the ship. That's why it's so big, Marco said. He laughed. Well. What do we know? We have just discovered the Yeerks have a great big weakness. A weakness? Rachel demanded. You can look at that ship and talk about weaknesses? But I understood what Marco meant. It means they need something, I said. Exactly, Marco said. Those big scoops on the side, I think they're for air. That's why they fly so far through the atmosphere when they come down. They're scooping up oxygen, and now they're sucking up water. It's a truck, Cassie cried. The whole huge ship is really just a truck. Yeah, I said. It carries air and water up to the Yeerk mothership in orbit. I guess they need Earth to supply them. So, it's not like Star Trek, where they can just make their own air and water, Marco mused. As long as they are up there in orbit, the Yeerks need the planet to supply them with air and water. Well, I think that's the first hopeful sign yet. We're running low on time, Cassie reminded everyone. Time to get out of here. Okay, but everyone be cool about it, Jake advised. We act like we're just sauntering off to go kill a moose, or whatever it is wolves saunter off to do. They drifted back from the shore of the lake. I stayed behind. I no longer have a time limit to worry about. The Yeerk ship was creating a warm updraft, so I spread my wings wide and rode it up. The 2 bug fighters were still circling low and slow. On the shore all around the lake, the bogus park rangers and the few Hork-Bajir kept up their patrols. Then I saw her. I know to human eyes, every hawk looks pretty much alike, but I knew, right away, it was her, the hawk I had freed from the car dealer. She, too, was riding the thermal, 1,000 yards higher than me. Without even really thinking about it, I adjusted the angle of my wings and soared up to her. She saw me, I was sure of that. Hawks don't miss much of what goes on around them. She knew I was coming toward her, and she waited. It wasn't even like we were friends. Hawks don't know what friend means, and she certainly didn't feel any gratitude toward me for saving her from captivity. Hawks don't have that sort of emotion either. In fact, in her mind, there may have been no connection between me and her freedom. Still, I soared up to her. I don't know why. I really don't. All we shared was the same outer body. We both had wings. We both had talons. We both had feathers. Suddenly, I was afraid. I was afraid of her. And it was insane because there I was, floating above an alien spaceship so big it could have been turned into a mall. But it was the hawk that frightened me. Or maybe not the hawk herself. Maybe it was the feeling I had, rising up to meet her in the sky. The feeling of recognition. The feeling of going home. The feeling that I belonged with her. It hit me in a wave of disgust and horror. No. No! I was Tobias. A human being, not a bird. I banked sharply away from her. I was human. I was a boy named Tobias. A boy with blonde hair that was always a mess. A boy with human friends, human interests. But part of me kept saying, it's a lie. It's a lie. You are the hawk. The hawk is you. And Tobias is dead. I plummeted toward the ground. I folded my wings back and welcomed the sheer speed. Faster. Faster. Then, with eyes that Tobias never had, I saw the wolf pack below, and I saw the danger before them. Chapter 10. My 4 friends stood stock still. They were staring with deadly focus at 5 other wolves. The 2 packs had run into each other. Between them lay a dead rabbit. It was the other pack's kill. My friends had stumbled into them. Now the 2 alpha males were locked in a deadly dominance battle. One of those alpha males was Jake. The other was an actual wolf. Jake had the human intelligence on his side, but if it came to a fight, the other wolf had more experience. He hadn't gotten to be the head wolf in his pack by losing fights. I would have laughed if I could. It was ridiculous. But at least it took my mind off the female hawk, off the feeling that drew me to her, that called out to me, even while the York ships zipped in a deadly dance through the air. Then it hit me with a shock. The time! They'd been low on time when they'd left the shore and started back. How much time had elapsed? I swooped down low. What are you guys doing? I demanded. Shut up, Tobias. Jake snapped tersely. We're in a situation here. Yeah, I can see that. Back away from them. I can't. If I back off, I lose. Lose what? I yelled. You're not a wolf. He's a wolf. Let him be the boss wolf. You guys are way low on time. It's not that simple, Cassie said. If Jake looks weak, the other alpha may attack. We screwed up. We're in their territory, and they think we're trying to steal their kill. Suddenly, the other big male snarled and took a step forward. Instantly, Jake bared his teeth still further and stood his ground. The dead rabbit lay between them, only a few feet from the vicious teeth on either side. This fight's over the rabbit, right? I said. No answer. Everyone was so tense they were quivering. At any second this would explode into an all-out gang warfare of the wolf territory. I knew what I should do, but it went against every instinct in the hawk's brain, and Tobias the human wasn't exactly thrilled either. I flapped up to gain a little height. I would need the speed. Then I locked my eyes on that rabbit and prayed that I was as fast as I thought I was. Oh man! Down I shot. My talons came forward. I screamed. Zoom! A wolf on each side. A dead rabbit. Thwack! My talons hit the dead animal and snatched at the fur. I flapped once, twice. The rabbit came off the ground. The big wolf lunged. I could feel his teeth rake my tail. I I flapped for all I was worth, scooting along the ground, half carrying, half dragging the dead rabbit, with the wolf racing just inches behind me. "Tobias!" Rachel cried. "Get out of here!" I yelled. "I have to drop this thing. It's too heavy." Fortunately, when he isn't being an idiot wolf, Jake is quick and decisive. "Let's go while we can." I dropped the rabbit just as the wolf caught up to me. Snap! Jaws that could kill a moose scissored the air a tenth of an inch from me. I'm telling you, he was close enough for me to count his molars. I felt the tiniest bit of breeze. It was enough. I opened my wings and let the breeze lift me up and away. "Oh, that was really not fun," I said. "Are you okay?" "I think I lost some tail feathers," I said. Tail feathers grow back. I caught up with the others. They were moving as fast as wolves can move. Time was running short. I didn't know exactly how much time. It was one of the continuing problems of morphing. Even if you could wear a watch, you wouldn't want to. A wolf or a hawk with a watch looks slightly suspicious. "I'll see if I can get a time reading," I said. I was tired, very tired, after the long flight here, and not one, but 2 close calls involving wolves. The hawk and me just wanted to find a nice branch with a view of an open field and take a rest. But I knew I couldn't. I gained a little altitude, not too much, just enough to spot one of the Park Service trucks. The controllers were off somewhere, but there was a clock in the dashboard. I stared at the number in disbelief. It had to be wrong. It had to be. Chapter 11. I wasn't tired anymore. At top speed, I raced back to my friends. I felt sick. I felt like my heart was going to burst. They had missed the deadline. It was too late. Too late, and they would all be trapped. Like me. Forever. "Morph!" I screamed as I closed in on them. Thought speak is like regular speech. It gets harder to hear the farther away you are. "Morph back! Now!" Maybe the clock in the truck was off. Maybe 5 minutes one way or the other wouldn't matter. There, I saw them. 4 wolves moving relentlessly toward the distant city. "Morph, now!" I screamed as I shot like a bullet over their heads. "How much time do we have?" Mirko demanded. "None." That got them going. I landed, exhausted, on a branch. Cassie was the first to begin to change. Her fur grew short. Her snout flattened into a nose. Long human legs swelled and burst from the thin dog legs. Her tail sucked back in and disappeared. She was already more than half human by the time the first changes began to appear on the others. "Come on, hurry!" I urged them. "What time is it?" Jake demanded. "You have about 2 minutes," I said. It was a lie. According to the clock, they were already 7 minutes too late. Too late. And yet, Cassie was continuing to emerge from her wolf body. Skin replaced fur. Her leotard covered her legs. But the others were not so lucky. "Ah!" I heard Rachel cry in my mind. Her morph was going all wrong. Her human hands appeared at the end of her wolf legs, but nothing else seemed to be changing. I looked, horrified, at Mirko. His normal head emerged with startling suddenness from his wolf body, but the rest of him had not changed. He looked down at himself and cried out in terror. It was an awful sound, half human, half wolf. This is worse than I had feared. I figured they would be trapped as wolves, like I had been trapped as a hawk, but they were emerging as half-human freaks of nature. They were living nightmares. Cassie ran from one to the next. "Come on, Jake, concentrate, focus. Rachel, bear down, girl. Picture yourself human. See yourself like you're looking in the mirror. Fight the fear, Mirko." I saw Mirko roll his human eyes up and stare at me. His gaze locked on me. It was like he hated me, or feared me. Both, maybe. I didn't move. If Mirko needed me to concentrate, that was fine. but it sent a shiver of disgust through me. I suddenly saw myself as they all must see me, as something frightening, a freak, an accident, a sickening, pitiable creature. Slowly, Marco began to emerge. Slowly, the human body appeared. Rachel too, and Jake. They were winning their battle. "That's it, Jake," Cassie urged. She held his hand tight between both of hers. "Come back to me, Jake. Come all the way back." I watched Rachel. She still had a small, shrinking tail. Her mouth still protruded. Her blonde hair was still more like gray fur. But she was going to make it. The clock must have been fast. A matter of 5 minutes, one way or the other, had determined their fates. I was glad they had made it. They were all human again. "We did it," Jake gasped weakly. He lay on his back on the pine needles. "We made it." "That was close," Rachel said. "That was way too close. It was so hard. It was like trying to climb up out of a pool of molasses." "I'm human again," Marco muttered. "Human. Toes, hands, arms and shoulders." He checked himself all over. "That was close," Cassie exulted. She gave Jake a hug. Then I guess she felt self-conscious, because she ran over and hugged Rachel and Marco. They were all laughing, all giggling with relief. "We're okay," Jake sighed. I was happy for them. Really, I was. But suddenly, I didn't want to be there. Suddenly, I desperately didn't want to be there. I felt an awful, gaping black hole open up around me. I was sick with the feeling of being trapped. Trapped. Forever. I looked at my talons. They would never be feet again. I looked at my wing. It would never be an arm. It would never again end in a hand. I would never touch. I would never touch anything. Anyone. Again. I dropped from the branch and opened my wings. "Tobias!" Jake shouted after me. But I couldn't stay. I flapped like a demon, no longer caring that I was tired. I had to fly. I had to get away. "Tobias, no! Come back!" Rachel cried. I caught a blessed breeze and soared up and away, my own silent, voiceless scream echoing in my head. Chapter 12. It was late when I returned to what was now my home. After I was first trapped in my hawk body, Jake had removed an outside panel that led into the attic of his house. I flew in through the opening. It was a typical attic. There were some dusty old cardboard boxes full of Jake and Tom's old baby clothes. There were open boxes of Christmas lights and decorations. There was a chest of drawers with a top that had been scarred by something or other. Jake had opened one of the drawers in the chest and packed it with an old blanket. It was nice of him. Jake has always been a decent guy. In the old days, he used to protect me from the punks at school who liked to beat me up. The old days, when I still went to school. How long ago had it been? A few weeks? A month? Not even. There was a Rubbermaid dish in a corner where no one was likely to see it. I was hungry. I clutched the dish with my left talon and pried the lid off with my hooked beak. Meat and potatoes and green beans. The meat was hamburger. I don't know how he arranged to get the food. His mom probably thought he was sneaking scraps to his dog, Homer. I hadn't told him yet, but I couldn't eat the vegetables or the potatoes. My system couldn't deal with much except meat. I, the hawk, was a predator. In the wild, hawks live on rat and squirrel and rabbit. I ate some of the hamburger. It was cold. It was dead. It made me feel bad to be eating it, but it filled me up. But it wasn't dead meat that I wanted. I wanted live meat. I wanted living, breathing, scurrying prey. I wanted to swoop down on it and grab it with my razor talons and tear into it. That's what I wanted. What the hawk wanted. And when it came to food, it was hard to deny the hawk's brain in my head. The hunger I felt was the hunger of the hawk. I flopped and hopped up into my drawer. but it was soft, and what my hawk body wanted was not the warmth and comfort of the blanket. Hawks make nests of sticks. Hawks spend their nights on a friendly branch, feeling the breeze, hearing the nervous chittering of prey, watching the owls hunt. I hopped up out of the drawer. I couldn't stay there. I was so tired I was past being able to rest. I was restless. I flew back out into the night. Hawks are not usually nocturnal. The night belongs to other hunters, but I wasn't ready to rest. I flew aimlessly for a while, but I knew in my heart where I was going. Rachel's bedroom light was still on. I fluttered down and landed on a birdhouse she had deliberately nailed out there for me to land on when I came over. I rustled my wings softly against the glass. I scratched it with one talon. Rachel? A moment later, the window slid up. She was there, wearing a bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. "Hi," she said. "I was worried about you." "Why?" I asked, but I knew the answer. "We weren't very sensitive this afternoon," she said. She spoke in a whisper. We couldn't let her mother or one of her little sisters overhear her having a one-sided conversation with no one. "Don't be silly," I said. "You guys barely escaped being, you know." "Come inside. I have my bedroom door locked." I hopped in through the window and fluttered over to her dresser. Suddenly, I realized something was behind me. I turned my head around. It was a mirror. I was looking at myself. I had a reddish tail of long straight feathers. The rest of my back was mottled dark brown. I had big shoulders that looked kind of hunched, like I was a football lineman ready for the snap. My head was streamlined. My brown eyes were fierce as I stared over the deadly weapon of my beak. I turned my head forward, looking away from my reflection. "I don't know what's happening to me, Rachel." "What do you mean, Tobias?" I wish I could have smiled. She looked so worried. I wish I could have smiled, just a little, to make her feel better. "Rachel, I think I'm losing myself." What? How do you mean?" she asked. She bit her lip and tried not to let me see. But of course, Hawkeyes missed nothing. "Today, the hawk we freed, she was there, at the lake. I wanted to go with her. I felt like I belonged with her." "You belong with us," Rachel said firmly. "You're a human being, Tobias." "How can you be so sure?" I asked her. "Because what counts is what's in your head and in your heart," she said with sudden passion. "A person isn't his body. A person isn't what's on the outside." "Rachel, I don't even remember what I looked like." I could see that she wanted to cry. But Rachel's a person with strength that runs all the way through her. Maybe that's why I came to see her. I needed someone to be sure. I wanted someone to let me borrow a little of their strength. She went over to her nightstand and opened the drawer. She rummaged for a minute, then came back to me. She was holding a small photograph. She turned it so I could see. It was me. The me I used to be. "I didn't know you had a picture of me," I said. She nodded. "It's not a great picture. In real life you looked better." "In real life," I echoed. "Tobias, someday the Andalites will return. If they don't, we're all lost, all the human race. If they do come back, I know they'll have some way to return you to your own body." "I wish I were sure," I said. "I am sure," she said. She put every ounce of faith into those 3 words. She wanted me to believe, but I could see the tears that were threatening to well up in her eyes as she lied. Like I said, hawks don't miss much. Chapter 13. Talking to Rachel helped. A little, anyway. I spent the night in my little drawer in Jake's attic. I spent the next day flying around, waiting for my friends to get out of school. In some ways, I realized, my situation wasn't all bad. For one thing, I had no homework. For another, I could fly. How many average kids can hit 40 miles per hour in level flight and break 80 in a dive? I went to the beach and rode the thermals there. It was best where the cliffs pressed right up against the blue ocean. I saw some prey, some mice and voles in the grass along the top of the cliff, but I ignored them. I was Tobias. I was human. Jake had called a meeting for all of us for that evening in his room. Tom, Jake's brother, would be away at the meeting of the sharing. The sharing is a front for the Yerks. They pretend it's some sort of Boy Scouts or whatever, but its real purpose is to recruit voluntary hosts for the Yerks. I've gotten into the habit of checking people's watches from up in the air. Also, you know how banks sometimes will have a big sign showing the time and temperature? Those are helpful too. It's strange the things you miss when you lose your human body. Like showers. Like really sleeping all the way, totally passed out. Or like knowing what time it is. In the afternoon, I flew back to the school. I drifted around overhead till it let out. Then I waited till I saw Jake, Rachel, Cassie, and Marco come out. They came out separately. Marco had pointed out that it was bad security for them to be seen together all the time. I followed the bus with Jake and Rachel in it. They lived closest, just a few blocks away from each other. Marco lived in some apartments on the other side of the boulevard. He lived with just his dad, since his mom drowned a few years ago. Cassie had to travel the farthest, out to the farm, which was about a mile from the others. For me, it was about a 3-minute flight. Like I said, there are some good things about having wings. I guess really, it's okay most of the time. Really. I floated on a nice thermal above Jake's house, waiting for him to get home. I saw him get off the bus and go inside. I couldn't see Rachel from where I was because there were trees in the way, but I did see Marco for just a second or two. I concentrated on watching my friends. That way I didn't notice the squirrels in the trees as much, or the mice that poked their little noses from their holes and sniffed the air. After a while, I saw Tom leave Jake's house. Tom looks just like Jake, only he's bigger and has shorter hair. I'd never really known Tom well, but it was during the doomed attempt to rescue him from the Yerk pool that I had been trapped. He headed down the street, acting nonchalant. Then, a block away, a car pulled up and opened a door. He jumped in, off to his meeting of the sharing. After a while, I saw the others start to head for Jake's house. I could identify Rachel easily. She was practicing for her gymnastics as she walked. She would walk along the edges of curbs, pretending they were balance beams. I flew in Jake's window once everyone was there. I didn't want it to look like I had been hanging around all that time with nothing to do. About time, Marco said. We've all been waiting here for like an hour. They'd been there for about 2 minutes. I'm a busy bird, I said. I lost track of time. We better make this kind of quick, Cassie said. Miss Lambert gave us papers to write by day after tomorrow, and I promised my dad I'd help him release this great horned owl. He was a mess. He landed on a power line and got fried. But he's ready to go now. We have a habitat picked out. Friend of yours, Tobias? Marco teased me. The others all shot him nasty looks, but the truth was, it made me feel okay to be teased by Marco. Marco teased everyone. We hawks don't hang out with owls, I said. They do nights. We mostly do days. He's a beautiful animal, Cassie said. I see them sometimes at night, I said. They're amazing. So cool. Totally silent. Their wings don't make a sound. One can fly an inch in front of your face and you won't hear it. Okay, look, if Cassie has to get going, maybe we better deal with business, Jake said. Yeah, if you two are done with the bird-talking part of the meeting, Marco added. I have to get going soon too, Rachel said. She looked a little embarrassed. My gymnastics class is putting together an exhibition at the mall. Oh, I am there, Marco crowed. No, you are not there, Rachel snapped. None of you is going near that place. You know how I feel about having to put on stupid exhibitions. Rachel is not one of those people who likes to perform in front of a crowd. We have learned how the Yeerks get their air and water, Jake said, trying to get down to business. And we even know where they do it. And we know more or less when. There ought to be some way for us to use that information. Any ideas? Rachel shrugged. We try and find a way to destroy the ship. Marco raised his hand like he was in class. How about if we, go back to talking about birds? Rachel ignored him as she usually did. Look, we find some way to destroy that ship, and maybe the Yeerks will run out of air and water. Maybe that will even mean they have to give up and go home. Maybe, Cassie said. Or maybe they have a dozen more of those ships in different places all over the Earth. We don't know how many ships they have. This one would be all we need if, Marco began to say. Then I guess he realized he was about to suggest something dangerous. I mean, nothing. What? Jake asked him. What were you gonna say? Marco looked trapped. He shrugged. Okay, look. What if that ship didn't get blown up, or disintegrated, or whatever? What if it was flying over the city, and suddenly the cloaking device was turned off? We were all silent as we thought about that image. Suddenly, 1 million people would look up in the sky and see a ship the size of a skyscraper. People would probably notice it, Jake said. Oh yeah, they would notice it, Rachel agreed. Radar would see it too. 1 million eyewitnesses. The controllers would never be able to cover it up. People would videotape it, I said. They would take pictures. There would be radar tapes. Jake grinned. The whole world would see. The entire human race would realize what was happening. He was getting excited now. And then we could go to the authorities. The controllers won't be able to stop us. We could tell all we know. Rachel's eyes were gleaming. We could tell them about the sharing. We could turn in Chapman. And you figure Visser 3 and his pals are just going to sit around and do nothing? Marco asked. Like you said, we have no idea how many ships they have, or how much power. Jake looked a little disappointed. They don't have enough power to attack Earth openly, I said. And how do you know that? Marco asked. Because they are going to a lot of trouble to keep themselves a big secret. You don't hide if you're tough enough to come out and kick butt in a fair fight. I expected Marco to have some smart comeback, but he just nodded. Yeah, you're right. This could be our big chance, Rachel said. Uncloak that ship so the whole world can see. I hate to ask this, Marco said with a groan, but how do you think you're going to do that? It was Jake who answered. We'll have to get inside that ship. He winked at Marco. Want to know how? Marco shook his head. Not really. Through the water pipes, as fish. Marco sighed. Jake, I just told you I didn't want to know. Chapter 14. Rachel and Cassie took off, heading in different directions. Have a good show, Cassie called to Rachel. Yeah, right, Rachel said grumpily. I'll be there soon, Marco told Rachel. Don't fall off any bounce beams until I get there. Rachel shot Marco one of her, "You're a dead man if you mess with me" looks, and disappeared, leaving just Marco, Jake, and me. She really kind of likes me, Marco said, with a wink at Jake and me. Uh-huh, Jake commented dryly. Look, Tobias, if we're going to do this mission, it can't be till the weekend. Why? The timing. We have to morph to travel up there. There are no buses, and we can't walk that far in human bodies. Even as wolves, though, it takes time. It took more than an hour last time. It just seemed to me that we might want to get up there in the morning, camp out somewhere hidden, and then be ready by afternoon when the Yeerk ship shows up. And this time we may not want to travel around that other wolf pack's territory, Marco pointed out. I don't want to get into it with them again. It made sense. I guess you're right. So if you're going to camp early in the day, you need a Saturday. Anyway, it might be a good idea if we had as much information about the area as we can get. Jake gave me a thoughtful look. So I was thinking, yeah, I interrupted. I'll spy out the situation. I'll look for some place you can hide. I have a lot of time on my hands. No hands, exactly, but lots of time. Marco Marco and Jake both laughed. I think Marco was surprised that I could make a joke about myself. I saw an intense look in Jake's eyes. He was wondering if I was okay. I'm cool, I thought spoke privately to him, so Marco couldn't hear. I was just a little weirded out by watching you all struggle to get out of those wolf morphs. He raised an eyebrow and nodded. He had been upset too, I could imagine. I suspected there had been lots of nightmares over that mess. Okay, so now what? Marco asked. Do I sneak into the mall without Rachel being able to see me? Or do we all sit around and play Doom? I have homework, Jake said. And trust me, Marco, if Rachel sees you at the mall making faces while she's on the balance beam, she will turn into an elephant and stomp you. Marco winced. Remember the good old days when all a girl could do to you was call you names? I flew off, leaving them to play video games or do homework, or however they ended up killing time. Either way, it wasn't something I could participate in. It was kind of a shame, really. With my eyesight and the reaction time I have, I could probably be major competition in Doom. But joysticks and control pads aren't made for Talons. I swooped out into the cool afternoon. I drifted around for a while. I checked out Chapman's house. Chapman is our assistant principal. He's also one of the highest-ranking controllers. When we first learned Chapman was one of them, he was ordering a Hork-Bajir to kill any of us who were caught. He told the Hork-Bajir to save our heads for identification. Not the kind of thing you expect to hear, even from an assistant principal. But it turned out things were more complicated than we thought. Chapman had joined the Yeerks, but he had done it in part to save his daughter, Melissa. Melissa would be at the gymnastics thing with Rachel, at the mall. Remembering the mall made me sad. It was just another one of those places I couldn't go anymore. There was a long list. School, movie theaters, amusement parks. Wait a minute. I could go to the amusement park, and I wouldn't even have to pay admission. The thought made me happy. I don't know why. It wasn't like I could ride the roller coaster. But still, the idea kind of perked me up. I could bust right into the gardens anytime I wanted. Come to think of it, I could also watch any football or baseball game I ever wanted to see, too, as long as it was outdoors. And concerts! Whoa! Big stadium concerts? No problem. No tickets needed. That's the way I needed to be thinking. There were millions of things I could do as a bird that I couldn't do as a human. But not right now. I turned and headed toward the mountains. I had a job to do. It was another good thing about being me. I was the ultimate airborne spy. There was a long line of towering clouds running to the mountains. Perfect weather for me. Thermals are what pushed those clouds up so high. I just let myself get into it. It wasn't a bad life, not really. I was flying. Back when I was in my old body, I used to look up at the sky and wish I could fly. Now I could. I figured there were probably kids down on the ground right now looking up at me and thinking, wow, that would be so cool. If only I had something to eat. I was feeling a little hungry. Should have asked Jake to grab me a snack. It happened before I really even had time to think about it. I guess it was because I was feeling good, feeling relaxed. I was above the woods, just a half mile or so beyond Cassie's farm. The trees open up to form little meadows. This is what redtails love, a little meadow. It was full of prey, squirrels scouring the ground for nuts, hopping, then sitting up on their hind legs to look around nervously, mice that scurried from hole to hole, rabbits, a rat. My eyes focused on it with absolute intensity. I sort of shrugged one shoulder, turned sharply in midair, and plummeted toward the earth in a stoop. My wings were back, my head low, my talons tucked back for maximum speed. Sudden flare. I opened my wings. The shock of the air, talons raked forward, eyes never moving even a millimeter from the rat. Focus. I struck. An incredible rush of excitement surged through me. I was ecstatic. Ecstatic! That was the only word for it. It was intense beyond anything I had ever experienced. Talons hit warm flesh. My razor claw squeezed. The rat squirmed in my grip, but it was helpless. Helpless! I was in a frenzy. I hooded my wings around my kill, shielding it from any other predators that might try to steal it away. No, 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 no! I fell back. I looked down at my talons. They were red with blood. Rat meat dripped from my beak. In my panic, I forgot what I was. I tried to run away, but I no longer had legs and feet to run with. I had killing talons. Bloody talons. I fell in the dirt. No! I cried voicelessly, but I could still see the dead rat, and I could taste it. And no matter how many times I said no, it would always be yes. Chapter 15. I flew. I flew as fast and as hard as I could. I wanted to go so fast that the memory of killing and eating the rat would be left way behind me. But not even I can fly that fast. Human. I am human. I am Tobias. I don't know why it was Rachel I wanted to see right at that moment. Maybe she was just the closest thing I had to a real friend. Maybe it was the way she seemed so sure of who and what I was. I needed someone to be sure. Down below, I saw the huge, irregular rectangles of the mall. I saw a glass door, people streaming in and out. Rachel, that's where she was. I screamed in rage and frustration and terror as I stooped. I shot toward the door like I'd shot toward the rat. But I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't going to slow down. I was just going to end this right now. I would hit the glass at full speed, and maybe that would awaken me from this nightmare. The speed just kept building. The door rushed up at me. The earth itself was jumping up to hit me. A guy, dark hair, short, stepped to the door. He opened it. Swoop! I must have been doing 80 as I hurled through the open door. A second set of doors, but these were open too. No impact. No awakening. Colors and bright lights all around me. Like a high-speed kaleidoscope. The Gap. Express. The Body Shop. Easy Spirits. Mrs. Fields. Zoom! I was a bullet, blazing inches over the heads of the shoppers. I heard screams. I heard cries of amazement. I didn't care. I wanted to hit something. I wanted to wake up. I wanted to fall to the ground because my wings had disappeared and had been replaced by clumsy legs and flailing arms. I wanted to be me again. I'm human. I am human. I am Tobias. 9 West. Radio Shack. B. Dalton. Benetton. A world I knew. A world where I belonged. Places I had been. Foods I had eaten. The world of human beings. Zoom. Suddenly, in seconds, I was at the center of the mall. A crowd was standing around in a circle. In the middle of the circle, blue mats were on the floor. Girls in leotards were doing mid-air flips and graceful backbends. People on the upper level were crowded around the railing to look down. Rachel was on the balance beam. She was just raising one leg, balancing on the other. I was a brown and gold and red missile shooting past her. Tobias! She cried. Straight ahead, a wall. A blank wall where they were going to put a new shop. I was still moving fast. I could still hit it and wake myself up from this nightmare. No! Rachel cried. I flared and shot straight up. The wall scraped my stomach. The ceiling was glass. A skylight. I was there. A last-second turn, almost too late. My shoulder hit the glass. I bounced off and began to fall down toward the upraised faces staring at me with horror and amazement and pity. I saw Rachel's face in that crowd. Her eyes pleaded silently. No, she mouthed. No. I fell, stunned and dazed. Rachel, still balanced on the beam, caught me as I dropped. She fell off, and the two of us tumbled onto the mat. You have to get out of here, she muttered tersely. I killed! I cried. You don't understand, Rachel. I'm lost. I killed! No, not as long as you have me and the others. You aren't lost, Tobias. Helping hands were clawing, trying to save Rachel from the crazed, out-of-control bird. She gave me a heave, just enough to get me into the air. Anyone watching would have thought she was trying to get me off her. I flopped up, just out of reach of a dozen hands that clawed the air trying to grab me. Someone threw a shopping bag at me. I dodged. But there was no escape. Overhead I saw the skylight. Blue sky. The hawk in my head wanted the sky. It knew safety was up in the high blue. The hawk powered straight up at glass that he didn't understand. The glass that would be like a brick wall. But I couldn't fight it anymore. The hawk had won. I had killed and eaten, and I had loved it. The ecstasy of the hunt. Ecstasy. In a second, it would all be over. One more stroke of my powerful wings and the glass. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar face on the upper level. Suddenly, something shot past me. Small, white, stitched. Crash! The baseball hit the glass just inches ahead of my beak, just where Marco had aimed it. Glass shards fell around me. I shot through the hole. Sky! The hawk flew fast and straight. I let it go. I surrendered. Tobias, a boy whose face I could no longer remember, no longer existed. Chapter 16. The next few days were like a long, slow dream. I stayed away from Jake's house. I did not communicate with my friends. I disappeared. I found a place for myself. It was perfect red-tailed territory, a place where I had made my first kill. A nice meadow surrounded by trees. Not far off, there was a marshy area that was good too, although there was another red-tail who had a territory over there, so I couldn't hunt there often. I spent my days hunting. Sometimes I would ride the high, hot winds and watch the meadow. Sometimes I would sit in a tree and wait till some unwary creature ventured out. Then I would swoop down on it, snatch it up, kill it, eat it while the blood was still warm. Days were easier than nights. During the day, I was hunting almost all the time. It keeps you busy, because most of the time you miss. It can take quite a few tries before you make a kill. Nights were worse. I couldn't hunt at night. The nights belonged to other predators, mostly the owls. At night, my human mind would surface. The human in my head would show me memories, pictures of human life, pictures of his friends. The human in my head was sad, lonely. But the human Tobias really just wanted to sleep. He wanted to disappear and let the hawk rule. He wanted to accept that he was no longer human. Still, at night, as I sat on my familiar branch and watched the owls do their silent, deadly work, the human memories would play in my head. But other memories were there too. I remembered the female hawk, the one that had been in the cage. I knew where her territory was, near a clear lake in the mountain. So one day, I flew there, to the mountain lake. I saw her down on a tree branch. She was watching a baby raccoon, preparing to go for a kill. She would have to be very hungry to go for a raccoon, no matter how small. Raccoons are very tough, very violent creatures. As I watched, unnoticed by her, she swooped. The raccoon spotted her. A quick dodge left, and the hawk sailed harmlessly past. The baby raccoon ran for the edge of the woods. His mother was there. No hawk was crazy enough to go after a full-grown raccoon. That was not a fight the hawk was going to win. She settled back on her branch. I floated overhead, waiting to see if she would spot me, and waiting to see what she would do when she did notice me. I had to be cautious. She was a female, and females are a third bigger, on average, than males. Suddenly, I saw fast movement in the woods. A chase! It was always kind of exciting watching a kill, even by another species. It heightened my own hunting edge. The prey was running awkwardly on its two legs, running and threading its way through the underbrush. It stumbled and hit the ground hard. It seemed very slow to get up. It ran again. I could hear gasping breath. It was weakening. The prey was squealing, loud yelping vocalizations. Prey often squeal. The predator moved on two legs also, but these legs were built for greater speed. It had blades growing from its arms. It used the blades to slash the bushes and weeds. It cleared its way through them like a lawnmower chopping down tall grass. Lawnmower? No, something else. Salad shooter. Yes, that's what Marco had called them. Marco. The image came to my mind. Short, dark hair, human. It hit me like a lightning bolt. Suddenly I realized this prey was a human. Why should I care? It was prey. That was the way it worked. Predator killed prey. No! It was a human being. Help! Help! That was the vocalization. It meant something. Help! Help me! The predator was very close. In a few seconds he would make his kill. The predator was powerful. The predator was swift. Hork Bashir. Help me! Someone help! I don't know how to describe what happened next. It was like my entire world flipped over. Like 1 minute, it was one thing, one way, then, boom, it was something totally different. It was like opening your eyes after a dream. The prey was a human being. The predator was a Hork Bashir. This was wrong. Wrong. It had to be stopped. I stopped. A few seconds earlier, I was thinking that no sane hawk would go after a full-grown raccoon. Now I was going after a Hork Bashir. Hork Bashir compared to raccoons like a nuclear bomb compares to a bow and arrow. It would have to be the eyes. The eyes were the only weak spot. I rocketed toward the Hork Bashir. The human slipped and fell again. Talons forward. The Hork Bashir was totally focused on his prey. I hit him fast and hard and sailed past. Grrr! The Hork Bashir yelled. He clutched at his eyes. The human was up and running again. Gruffish, do me, getting away. The Hork Bashir yelled in the strange combination of human and alien speech that they use when working with humans. He was calling for help. I used my momentum to soar up over the tops of the trees. He had plenty of help available. Another Hork Bashir about 1,000 yards off, and 2 of the bogus park rangers were nearer. It was all coming back to me. The fake park rangers, the Hork Bashir enforcers. This was the lake. A Yeerk supply ship must be on its way in. Yeerks. Andalites. My friends, the audiomorphs. Yes, my friends. I remembered now. But this human was not one of them. This human prey was older, a stranger. The freed hawk was watching me. I could almost feel her drawing me toward her. It was like a magnet. She was my kind. She was like me. But the park rangers were in hot pursuit of the human now. The human was nothing like me. Poor, clumsy ground runner that he was. He was just prey. And yet, for some reason, I couldn't let him be prey. I couldn't. Me. Tobias. Chapter 17. I landed on the perch outside Rachel's window. It was night, but she wasn't asleep. She was reading a book in bed, propped up by several pillows. I fluttered a wing against the glass. Rachel? She started. The book went flying. She jumped up and ran to the window, throwing it open. Tobias? More or less, I said wryly. She started to hug me, to put her arms around me, but then she realized that wasn't possible. Birds aren't exactly made for hugging. Are you okay? We've all been terrified. Cassie said maybe you were killed or something. There are all kinds of things that can happen. Jake is so depressed. I'm okay, I said. I flapped over to her dresser. Now that she was sure I was safe, she was starting to get mad. It made me smile inwardly. That was Rachel for you. Tobias, what is the deal with you? Why would you just disappear and leave us all worrying for days? It's hard to explain, I said. I guess the hawk sort of won out over me. Not that it's really that way. I mean, the hawk's instincts, they're strong. I told her about my first kill, about how much it horrified me. I don't know how I expected her to react. She tried to look sympathetic, but I could see it bothered her. I lost control, I admitted. For the last couple of days, I've been living like a hawk. All the way like a hawk. I think I was starting to forget me. I was starting to lose touch with humans. Then something happened. What? She went to check her door and make sure neither of her sisters were nearby. I could hear that the house was quiet. What happened? I told her about going to the lake. I told her about the guy being chased by Hork-Bajir. Fortunately, I could see the terrain better than the Hork-Bajir or those human controller park rangers. I led him away from them. I told him when to hide and when to run. You talked to him? I thought spoke, yes. There was no alternative. I couldn't let them catch him. He had seen a Hork-Bajir. They wouldn't have let him go. Rachel looked stunned. But now he knows about you. And he knows about the Hork-Bajir. What's he going to do? Go tell people he was chased through the woods by an alien monster and rescued by a telepathic bird? Rachel laughed. Yeah, good point. People would just think he was insane. Besides, if he started talking openly about the Yeerks, they would find him and silence him. Exactly what I explained to him. I think he'll probably keep quiet. He'll try to forget it ever happened. You saved him, Rachel said. I almost didn't, I admitted. At first, I just saw another predator and his prey. No different from watching the owls at night. No different from what I do myself. Kill to eat. Rachel thought about that for a moment. The Yeerks and their slaves aren't killing to eat, she said. They're killing to control and dominate. Killing because it's the only way you can eat, because that's the way nature designed you. That's one thing. Killing because you want power or control is evil. I guess you're right, I said. I hadn't thought about it that way. What you did, eating, whatever, well, that's natural for a hawk. Nothing a Hork-Bajir does is natural. They aren't even in control of their own bodies or minds. They are tools of the Yeerks, and the Yeerks only want power and domination. I know, I said, but I wasn't totally convinced. Still, it was comforting to be talking to Rachel. You are human, Tobias, she told me softly. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Sometimes I just feel so trapped. I want to move my fingers, but I don't have any. I want to speak out loud, but I have a mouth that's only good for ripping and tearing. Rachel looked like she might start crying. It was alarming to me because Rachel isn't a girl who bursts into tears, ever. Anyway, look, I'm sorry I ruined your exhibition at the mall the other day. She smiled. What do you mean? It was perfect. I was just starting my routine, and you know how much I hate having to do those public shows like that. You put an end to the whole thing real fast. I laughed silently. I can imagine. I hope no one was hurt by the falling glass. No, everyone was fine. But what were you going to do if Margot had missed with that baseball? You would have hit that glass awfully hard. I didn't know what to say. Rachel came closer and stroked my crest with her hand. It made the hawk in me uncomfortable, but at the same time, it was similar to preening, which was kind of pleasurable. What I told you the other day, Tobias, remember? You're not lost as long as you have Jake and Cassie and me. Even Marco. He came through for you, big time. We're your friends. You're not alone. I think I would have cried then, but hawks can't cry. And someday, the Andalites will come. Someday, I said, trying to sound confident. Well, I better go see Jake. The mission is supposed to begin tomorrow. We don't have to go through with that, Rachel said. Yes, we do, I said. More than ever, I understand that. See, there are human beings all over, trapped in bodies controlled by Yeerks. Trapped, unable to escape. Rachel, I know how they feel. Maybe I can't escape. Maybe I am trapped forever. But if we can free some of those others, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's what I need to do to stay human. Chapter 18. The next day, we went ahead with the mission. I flew cover overhead while 4 gray wolves ran beneath me. We timed it so we would arrive in the area very early in the morning, many hours before the Yerks would arrive to hunt intruders.
So let me get this straight, Tobias,
Marco said.
You're taking us to a bear cave? As in big grizzly bears? And this is a good thing?
Not grizzlies, Cassie interrupted. Not in this area. We'd be talking black bears. They're much smaller.
Swell. I am totally reassured. Just a small bear cave.
The bears are long gone, I said. There are just a few bears around, and this cave is empty. Trust me, I spied it out yesterday. I've seen raccoons and skunks running in and out of there. They wouldn't be doing that if there were bears.
Excuse me, Jake? Did Tobias just say skunks? I must have heard wrong, because only an idiot would think hanging out with skunks is a good idea.
We're not going to hang out with skunks, Jake said patiently. The skunks don't live there, I said. They just run in there to get away from predators. I didn't have to explain anymore. I think everyone guessed how I knew that skunks ran in there to get away from predators. Look, it's close to the lake and I don't think the Yerks know about it, I said. Sorry, but there wasn't a convenient Marriott hotel where I could get you a room for the night.
So that means no room service either?
Marco asked.
Well, okay, as long as this cave gets cable. The big game's on ESPN tonight.
I was carrying a tiny nylon pouch that Rachel had put together. It was tan in color, so a casual observer wouldn't notice it and wonder why a red-tailed hawk was carrying luggage. In the sack was a small watch. It weighed almost nothing. There was also some fish hooks, fishing line, and a small lighter. Altogether, it only weighed about 2 ounces, but it did slow me down a little. We reached the cave with plenty of time to spare on the 2-hour deadline.
Oh, this looks lovely,
Marco said, looking at the thorns and a scrub bush around the cave entrance. I haven't really been inside, I admitted. I landed outside the entrance. The opening to the cave was no more than 2 feet across and about 4 feet high. It was easy for Jake and Rachel and their wolf morphs to leap nimbly through. Unless there really was a bear inside, they would scare off whatever might be in there. Empty, Rachel reported. Nothing in there but a couple of spiders and a scared mouse. I decided to try a joke. Chase him out here. I'm hungry. Only Marco laughed. The others all acted like I'd said something embarrassing. Maybe I had.
Let's morph back,
Marco suggested.
One close call with being trapped as a wolf is plenty for me.
I'll go look around, I said. Sometimes I didn't like being there when they morphed. A few minutes later, they all came out. Marco was complaining, as usual.
You know, we really have to figure out how to deal with the shoe situation,
he muttered.
Thorns and no shoes, not a good combination.
The 4 of them were barefoot and dressed only in their morphing outfits. Leotards for the girls, biker shorts and a tight t-shirt for Jake and Marco. We need to gather firewood, Jake said with his hands on his hips. It wouldn't hurt to warm up that cave a little before the Yerks get here. Don't you love it when Jake gets all masterful like that? Rachel teased. I'm just trying to get us organized, Jake said defensively. We'd better get started fishing, Cassie pointed out. If we don't catch fish, we're pretty much wasting our time. The plan was to morph into fish and enter the Yerk ship's water pipes. Of course, in order to morph into something, you first have to acquire it, which means being able to touch it. Shouldn't be any big problem, Jake said confidently.
Uh-huh,
Cassie said dryly. And how many times have you gone fishing? Counting this time? Once, he laughed. Cassie rolled her eyes. Typical suburban boy, she said affectionately. It isn't all that easy. Then you guys better get started, I advised. I'll go look around. Take care of yourself, Tobias, Rachel called out as I took wing. I watched from on high as they made one failed attempt after another to convince a fish to bite one of our hooks. It seemed ridiculous, but the entire plan was hanging on the question of whether or not we could catch a fish. And time was running out. The day wore on. Still, no fish. Jake was getting edgy. Rachel was downright cranky. And Marco? Forget Marco.
This is ridiculous,
he raged.
We're 5, barely intelligent human beings, and we can't outsmart one fish that probably has an IQ of 4?
Cassie was the only one remaining calm. Fishing is a matter of skill and luck, she said placidly. A smart fisherman learns not to become frustrated. Jake looked at the little watch we'd brought along. From what we know, the Yerks will start arriving in an hour to clear the area. Rachel nodded. Even if we catch fish now, we won't have time to test the morph. Maybe we should back off for today, I suggested. You really ought to test out the fish morph. You guys all know how much trouble a morph can be at first. Jake shook his head firmly. I don't think so, Tobias. We'd have to wait until we had another day off. Tomorrow is no good because I have stuff with my parents. So does Marco, which means we'd have to wait a whole week. So we try again next weekend. What's the hurry? The hurry is that the Yerks can't keep coming to the same lake forever. Sooner or later, the level of the water will start dropping from them taking so much. They must use one lake for a while, then move on to another. It could take forever for us to find where they move to next. It made sense, but it didn't make me feel any better about it. This is the first water animal any of us have morphed. You don't have any idea what it's going to be like. I know, Jake snapped. Look, Tobias, I know it's not exactly ideal. Ha! Cassie yelped. She yanked at the line she was holding. I believe we may have a fishy. It took just a few seconds to haul in the fish. Trout, she said, looking it over as it flopped in the shallow water. The hook was poked through its lip. It was about 10 inches long, not very big. The four of them stared blankly at it. We have to become that? Marco asked. It's a fish, Cassie said. What did you expect? Marco shrugged. I don't know. Something more like Jaws. This is just a fish. I mean, we could clean him and eat him with a little lemon juice. Maybe some fries on the side. The others turned and gave him a dirty look. Cassie reached down into the water and took hold of the squirmy gray thing. She concentrated, her eyes closed halfway. She was acquiring it. The fish DNA was being absorbed into Cassie's body. The gift of the Andalite. The curse of the Andalite. The power to morph. Chapter 19. I don't like this plan, I blurted. Jake looked up at me in surprise. Tobias, you were in on the planning right from the start. Look, don't you guys realize how dangerous this could be? I realize, Marco said. I realize it plenty. But I thought you were the big gung-ho Yerk killer. Suddenly now you're afraid? I'm not afraid for me, I said. I'll be flying around safely while the four of you go into that ship. Cassie nodded. It's hard standing by while someone else is risking their life, she said. I understand how you feel, but there have been times when you were the one taking the risks. Look, we don't have time to debate this, Jake said. We have a plan we've all agreed to. Let's get on with it before the Yerks show up. Jake gets peevish when someone questions things after everything's already been decided. Usually it's Marco getting on his nerves. We'll be okay, Rachel said confidently. Rachel took the fish in her hand. The fish went limp, as usual, while the acquiring was happening. Suddenly, I couldn't watch anymore. I just had a flash of memory, watching the four of them straining to get out of their wolf bodies. What if they were trapped in fish morph? The idea of being trapped was still not something any of them really understood. I mean, they knew it had happened to me, but people are funny. They never think something bad will happen to them. I knew it could happen. And to be trapped as a fish? It made me sick just thinking about it. The rest of your life in the body of a fish? Being trapped in a hawk's body seemed downright pleasant by comparison. I'm going to go upstairs and see if anyone's coming, I said. I caught a small breeze and flapped hard to clear the treetops. It was tough work gaining enough altitude to get a good view of the area. It was mostly dead air all around. But I was glad for the workout. It took my mind off imagining what life would be like if my only friends in the world were trapped as a fish in a mountain lake. I would have laughed if it weren't so serious. I mean, come on, how many kids have to worry about all their friends becoming fish? Life had definitely gotten strange since that night when we saw the Andalite landing in the construction site. I circled higher and higher till I could see the entire lake and most of the surrounding area. No park rangers. Yet. I wondered if Jake was right and maybe the Yeerks would move on to another lake. Maybe they already had. Then, there, way down below, on a branch. The hawk. The female I had freed from captivity. She was watching me. I could see her eyes follow me across the sky. In part, I knew she was merely watching me for the simple reason that I was in her territory. Hawks are defensive about their territory. They don't want strangers coming and grabbing all the best prey. But I had this feeling that there was something more going on. She wanted me to join her. I don't know how I knew that, but I did. She wanted me to fly down to her. Some people think hawks mate for just a season. Some people think they mate for life, and I don't really know which is true. One thing I knew for sure, I wasn't ready to settle down with anyone, especially not a hawk. And yet, there was this feeling in me, like I belonged with her. I looked away. I would be glad when this mission was over and I no longer had to come here into her territory. She confused me. Suddenly, movement. I had let myself become distracted. Trucks, jeeps. They were rolling down the road. They were within a mile and moving fast. I looked frantically for my friends. There they were. I shrugged off the wind beneath my wings and dropped toward them. Here they come, I cried. Get to the cave. They ran for the cave, but it was harder to crawl inside in their human bodies. The wolves' thick pelts had protected them against the scratches and tears of the bushes. Helicopter skimming above the trees. Too fast. My friends were still struggling to make it to the shelter of the cave. One of the helicopters was on a straight line to them. Oh man, I muttered. I still had a lot of my speed from the dive. I flapped hard, powering up to maximum speed, straight at the helicopter. Straight at it. I could see the pilot, a human controller. Beside him, a Hork-Bajir. Straight at them. The chopper was doing 90. I was doing a little less. The distance between me and the chopper's windshield shortened very fast. They weren't going to pull up. Chapter 20. The sound of the rotors was a roar. They were not going to pull up. We were going to hit. But then, a flicker in the pilot's eyes, a twitch of his hand on the control stick. I cranked right. The helicopter cranked left. It blew past me like a tornado. The backwash of the rotors caught me and tumbled me through the air. I fell, upside down. I folded my wings, flared my tail, and spun around. I opened my wings and swooped neatly between two trees. I banked left and flew over the cave. Rachel was the last one in. She was still clearly visible. The helicopter would almost certainly have seen her. I watched till she was safely inside. Okay guys, I don't think anyone saw you. Be cool till I tell you it's time. They couldn't answer, of course. They were still fully human, so they could hear my thought speech, but they could not respond in kind. The Yeerks went through the familiar routine. The phony park rangers fanned out around the lake with automatic weapons ready. The helicopters buzzed around until they decided the area was free of witnesses. The helicopters landed and the Hork-Bajir jumped out. They seemed extra careful. Probably Visser 3 had given them all kinds of grief over the guy I had helped escape the day before. Visser 3 was not a creature you wanted mad at you. Then, I felt it. The emptiness in the sky. The sense of something monstrously huge moving slowly through the air. It was above me. Slowly, it appeared, shimmering into reality like some kind of magic trick. You could never get used to how big that thing was. It felt like someone was hanging a small moon over your head. I flew out from under it, over closer to the cave. "It's here," I announced. From behind the truck ship came the usual guard of bug fighters. Only, instead of 2 bug fighters, there were 4. The Yeerks were definitely nervous this time. 2 of the bug fighters remained on patrol. The other 2 landed in the clearing beside the helicopters. Why? Why the extra security? Was it just because of the guy I had helped escape? I felt something new in the air above the hovering truck ship. Another cloaked ship. Not as large, but from the emptiness in the sky, I felt the dread I had felt before. The cloak shimmered out and the ship appeared. Black within black, an out-thrust spear razor-edged. I had seen this ship before. The Blade ship. I had seen it first at the construction site where the Andalite had been murdered while we cried helplessly. No wonder the Yeerks were nervous. The Blade ship lowered toward the landing area. The Hork-Bajir on the ground and the park rangers were in a frenzy now, searching the woods as if their lives depended on it. Someone had fired a Dracon beam. I looked and saw a deer in mid-leap sizzle and disappear. The Yeerks were shooting anything that moved. The doors of the Blade ship opened. More Hork-Bajir poured out, Dracon beams leveled. Behind them came a pair of taxons, slithering and shimmying on their needle legs, undulating their gross caterpillar bodies. And last, he stepped out. Dainty Andalite hooves, deadly Andalite tail, like a scorpion's, the mouthless Andalite face, the 2 small Andalite arms with too many fingers, the 2 mobile eyes mounted on antler-like stalks that turned this way and that, always searching so that the large main eyes could focus on one thing at a time. An Andalite body, but not an Andalite mind, for in that Andalite body lived a Yeerk, the only Andalite controller, the only Yeerk to ever enslave an Andalite, and thus the only Yeerk to have the power to morph. I dropped down into the trees. I waited till a patrolling Hork-Bajir had walked past the cave where my friends hid. When I was sure no one would see, I fluttered down and into the cave, scraping the bushes on either side. "Tobias, is that you?" Jake whispered. "Yes." "What are you doing here? That's not the plan." "Forget the plan. He's here." No one asked who. They all knew from the way I had said it. He was here. Visser 3. Chapter 21. "What is he doing here?" Cassie asked in a low, frightened whisper. "I guess he came to oversee the strip. Maybe it was because they let that guy get away."
He's here to kick butt on his boys,
Marco said, trying to sound tough.
They screwed up, and now he's here to make sure they don't do it again.
"It doesn't really matter why he's here," I pointed out. "He's here. And there are extra Hork-Bajir, and the whole crowd is way nervous. One of the Hork-Bajir Dracon a deer that just happened to be walking by." "A deer?" Cassie cried. "Those stupid jerks. Deer never hurt anyone." "The plan was for you to sneak down to the water, morph as soon as you got there, and head out for the ship's water intake pipe," I reminded them. "It was always a dangerous plan, but now it's impossible. 4 of you walking down to the water, then morphing? That's not going to happen. Not as alert as these guys are now."
Not with Visser 3 hanging around,
Marco agreed. "I disagree. It was Rachel. I think we should still try this. Look, if we pull this off, if we manage to get inside that ship and disable the cloaking device while they're still over the city, this whole thing will be over." Jake jumped in to support her. "We've always said, if there was just some way to show the world what was happening. Well, this is the way. This would be way too big for the controllers to cover up. I don't care what they are. Even if the mayor and the governor and the entire police force were controllers, they couldn't cover up something like this." "Jake, you're not listening. I'm telling you, there's no way you 4 can cruise down to the lake. You'll be dead before you take 5 steps." For a while, No one spoke. It was Cassie who finally broke the silence. "There may be a way," she said. "See, a fish can survive out of water for a couple of minutes, and the fish we're morphing is small." She looked at me. "Small enough for a red-tailed hawk to carry." Well, that idea got everyone's attention, I can tell you.
Excuse me?
Marco shrilled.
Are you saying you want me to not just morph into a fish, but to morph into a fish out of water and then be carried through the air by a bird?
Cassie bit her lip. "I'm just saying it could work." "It would work," Jake said. He and Rachel exchanged a slightly insane look that said, "Okay, let's try it." "No way," I said. "You guys are crazy. No offense, but this raises the danger level way beyond what it was to start with." "I know it's dangerous," Jake said, "but we may never get a chance this good." Marco whined. I argued, but in the end, it was 3 against 2. Besides, Jake was right. We had a chance to seriously mess up the Yerks. I have watched Marco morph into a gorilla, Rachel become an elephant and a shrew and a cat, Cassie become a horse, and Jake become a tiger and a flea. Man, was that one weird. But this was the first time anyone had tried morphing into an animal that lived in water. Cassie insisted on going first. "It was my idea," she pointed out. She did not point out that she was also the best morpher. "If you feel like you're suffocating, you have to back out of the morph," Jake told her. He took her hand. "Are you listening to me? You have to back out if it gets bad. You can't pass out halfway into a morph." Cassie smiled. "I will. Don't worry about me." She closed her eyes and began to concentrate. I've told you that Cassie is always the best at controlling a morph. She has an almost artistic talent, where she can make it all look kind of cool and not so gross. But not this time. As I watched, her hair disappeared completely. Her skin began to harden, like it was coated with varnish or something, like she had been dipped in clear plastic. Her eyes swung around to the side of her head. Her face bulged out into a huge mouth that gaped and seemed to be blowing invisible bubbles. As this happened, she was shrinking, but not fast enough. I could still see every nightmare change in her body. The way her legs shriveled up, smaller and smaller, till her legless body fell to the ground. From her lower back, her body stretched out, elongated. "Oh!" Rachel cried. A tail had just suddenly spurted from Cassie's behind. A fish tail. Now her varnished-looking skin cracked and split into a million scales. Her ears were gone. Her arms were shriveling. She was no more than 2 feet long, lying helpless, a monster, on the floor of the cave. "So far I'm fine," she said, but her thought speech was shaky. "Still breathing with my lungs." But at that moment, 2 slits appeared in her neck. Gills. "Ah!" she cried. "Cassie, pull out of it!" Jake cried in an urgent whisper. No, almost done. Tobias." "I'm ready," I said grimly. She was tiny now, less than a foot long. All that was left of her human body were 2 very tiny doll hands. They became little fins. Cassie flopped wildly. Her mouth gasped silently. "Go," Jake said. I closed careful talons around Cassie's squirming fish body, aimed for the small sliver of sky that I could see through the cave's opening, and flapped my powerful wings. I burst out of the cave into fresh air. "Are you okay, Cassie?" "Fish mind, panicky. Water now." "Hang in there. You've been through this before. You know how it is when you first go into a morph. You have to control the fish's instinct." Water, I can't breathe." I was about 10 feet up, racing for the water's edge. Suddenly, below me, a Hork-Bajir. He looked up and saw me, a bird with a fish in his talons. I doubted the Hork-Bajir would realize that red tails don't catch fish. At least I hoped he wouldn't. I swooped down over the water. The huge Yerk ship was just lowering its intake pipes into the water. I dropped behind a stand of trees that hugged the shoreline, Get ready, I warned Cassie. I let her go like one of those old World War II planes dropping its torpedo. She hit the water with a small splash. Are you alright? No answer. Cassie, I said, are you alright? Yeah, she said at last. I'm here. Are you dealing with the fish okay? Again, no answer. Then, whoa, cool, I'm underwater. I relaxed. Yeah, you sure are underwater, I said with a laugh. I was scared, she admitted. I know this sounds crazy, but I just keep seeing myself, fried, with a wedge of lemon and some tartar sauce. Chapter 22. Jake was next. He morphed and I flew him over the heads of 2 patrolling park rangers who did not even seem to notice me. Then came Marco. When I exited the cave with him, I practically ran into a big Hork-Bajir. He didn't take any notice of me either. Cassie's plan was working. Even with all the controllers on maximum alert, it never occurred to them that their enemy might be a bird with a fish in its talons. Back in the cave, it was just Rachel. So far so good, I said. Yeah, I guess so. Are you nervous? I'd have to be crazy not to be nervous. Oh well, here goes. She started to morph. I'd seen 3 others do it now, so it wasn't a surprise to me. But it was still horrifying to watch a friend, someone you cared about, twist and deform and mutate before your eyes. I don't think any of us will ever get used to morphing. Maybe the Andalites are used to it. I don't know. But I'll bet it creeps them out too, when they have to change. I looked away as Rachel began to get strange and hideous. She was almost completely a fish when it happened. Crash! Crash! Someone was forcing their way through the bushes at the mouth of the cave. Havrak, net there. A Hork-Bajir. Yes, I see it, a human voice said grumpily. You know, these human bodies aren't blind. Just because you're in a Hork-Bajir, don't get delusions. Use those blades of yours to hack some of those thorns out of the way. I heard a sound like fast machetes, slicing away the vines and thorns. Better not find anything in there, the human controller said. The Visser will do to you what was done to that poor fool yesterday who let the human escape. I looked at Rachel. It was too late for her to morph back. What's going on? She asked. Yerks, a human controller and a Hork-Bajir controller, right outside the cave. Go in, Vergurthver, puny body, haha. This was your sector to check. You didn't even notice the cave. Keep getting on my nerves and I'll tell him. He go for you and eat your lukelt, haha. Suddenly, a human head appeared, followed by shoulders. He was wearing a park ranger's outfit. We have to make a break for it, I told Rachel. Here they come. Yeah, there's a cave in here all right. There's some kind of bird. I grabbed Rachel, now fully in fish morph, but the human controller blocked the narrow entrance. Well, I thought, it worked with a helicopter. With a rush of wings, I flew right at his face. What the? He fell back, beating at the air. I scraped past him. The Hork-Bajir slashed at the air with one of his wrist blades. He shaved off an inch of my tail, but I was in the air now, moving faster. Only, it was hard with Rachel. The weight of a fish is more than a redtail can carry easily, and I had already carried 3. I was tired. Fortunately, I was also very scared. Fear can make you strong sometimes. A Dracon beam sizzled the air above me. Unfortunately for the Hork-Bajir who had fired, the Dracon beam did not stop when it buzzed by me. No, the Dracon beam hit the underside of the vast truck ship. A small, neat, round hole appeared in the bottom of the ship. It was too small to amount to anything, but suddenly the Hork-Bajir lost his interest in me. Fool! The human controller cried. Visser 3 will have your head for dinner! busy panicking, I dropped Rachel into the water with the others.
Good work, Tobias,
Jake said.
Be careful up there, my friend.
You too, I said. Good luck, you guys. I could barely see them, a small school of fish in the shallows. They swam off and disappeared into deeper water. As I've told you, there are limits to how far thought speech can reach. We don't really know what those limits are, but I wanted to stay as close to them as I dared, in case they needed me. Not that there was much I could do to help someone underwater. I didn't want to stay right over them. I figured that would look suspicious to anyone on shore. It was hard to figure out what to do. The monstrous bulk of the truck ship was overhead, leaving only a few feet open above the surface of the water. I decided I had to chance it. I flew under the ship, skimming the dappled water below, and practically scraping the metal belly of the ship above me. It was a very difficult flight. I had to stay almost totally level. I couldn't rise or fall by more than a couple of feet. You guys okay? Tobias? I can't believe you can still thought speak with that whole ship between us, Rachel said. I guess I could have told her the truth, that I was within a few feet of them. But then Jake would have just gotten all mad and told me not to take stupid risks. I figured that between the time he had taken through the entire morphing process and carrying them one at a time to the water, plus now the time swimming out to the big intake pipe, Cassie had been in morph for just over half an hour. Jake had 10 minutes more, then Marco and Rachel. What are you guys doing now? I asked. We're looking at the bottom of this intake pipe. There's tremendous suction, Rachel reported.
I'll go first and look around, see what's what,
Jake announced.
Here goes. Whoa! Oh man, whoa! Yeah!
Jake, are you okay? Cassie cried.
Oh yeah, what a rush! They should have a water slide like that in the gardens. It's like being sucked up a straw by a giant.
Cool, Rachel said. I'm next.
No, let me look around first,
Jake said.
I seem to be in some sort of big tank. It's not very deep, at least not yet. It's filling up. With these lame fish eyes, I can't see beyond the surface of the water very well. But I think up in the ceiling there's an opening, like a grate or something. Up in the ceiling? How are we going to get up there?
Marco asked.
Well, I think if they fill this whole tank, we'll be up near the top eventually. We should be able to morph to humans, let ourselves out, then morph into something more dangerous than our human bodies. Excuse me,
Marco said.
But does anyone ever stop to realize that some of the things we talk about doing are totally insane?
What, turning into fish so that we can be carried by a hawk and let ourselves be sucked up the pipe of an alien spaceship so that we can turn into tigers and gorillas and whatever and overpower the creepy aliens? Rachel asked. Is that what you mean by insane?
That's it exactly.
Yep, Rachel said. It is insane.
Well, okay,
Marco said.
As long as we know we're nuts, let's do it.
Chapter 23. There was nothing to do but wait. Wait while the water level inside the ship rose and carried my friends toward the top of the chamber, up to where the grate was. I could not maintain my level flight beneath the ship any longer. I said goodbye to my friends and zoomed out the far side. The open air was a blessing. I soared high on a nice thermal pattern created by the ship itself. I rose high up and over the top of the ship. The park rangers were all around on the ground. The helicopters and the 2 bug fighters were still parked on the ground in the little clearing. The blade ship was there too. The 2 other bug fighters continued zipping around at treetop level. While I watched, they brought the Hork-Bajir, who had carelessly fired off a Dracon beam. They dragged him before Visser 3. We'd gotten so we thought of the Hork-Bajir as these totally fearless, deadly monsters. But this Hork-Bajir was not looking very brave. He collapsed on the ground before Visser 3. I almost felt sorry for him. It was one of those terrible things about our battle against the Yeerks. See, our enemy was just the Yeerk slug that lived in the heads of the controllers. That Hork-Bajir may have been a controller, totally against his will. He had lost his freedom to the Yeerk in his head. Now he was about to lose his life, for something he had no real control over. I couldn't hear what was happening down on the ground, but I could see. My hawk eyes could see far too well. I turned away. I won't tell you what was happening to the Hork-Bajir. That memory will be my own private nightmare. But when next I looked, the Hork-Bajir was gone, and in his place was a sudden rush of other Hork-Bajir and Taxxons and humans, all surrounding Visser 3. The Visser looked angry. He was pointing at the sky. Within a few seconds, the helicopters were lifting off. The two bug fighters powered up and took off. I had a very bad feeling that I knew what had happened. The doomed Hork-Bajir had told Visser 3 about the bird he had fired at, and some other controller had probably said, "Oh yeah, I saw a bird acting suspiciously too." And someone had no doubt said, "Hey, wasn't it a bird that distracted the Hork-Bajir yesterday and let that human get away?" Visser 3 had put 2 and 2 together. An animal acting unlike an animal meant just one thing to him: Andalites in morph. I guess I should have been flattered that Visser 3 believed we Animorphs were true Andalite warriors. But it didn't make any difference whether he thought I was an Andalite or a human. He was sending his creatures into the sky, looking for a bird that was no bird. Me. A bug fighter skimmed over the trees. Its twin Dracon beams fired again and again in short, sharp spears of burning light. My heart was in my throat. They were killing every bird they saw. The hawk. This was her territory. But then, behind me, a helicopter. A Dracon beam. A near miss. I couldn't get away. Between the bug fighters and the helicopters, they were too numerous and too fast. But there was one place no one was going to risk firing a Dracon beam. Not after what Visser 3 had just done to the careless Hork-Bajir. I let go of the air beneath my wings and dropped. Down, down, down. Toward the vast truck ship, spread below me like a steel meadow. In an instant they were all on me, but the angles were wrong. I was too close to the ship. They couldn't fire. I landed on top of the hovering ship. I planted my talons on the hard, cold metal surface. It stretched in every direction around me. The surface curved down and away from me, so that I couldn't even see the edges. It was as if I was standing all alone on a metal moon. Over my head hovered the helicopters and bug fighters. I could see human and Hork-Bajir and Taxxon eyes all focused on me. I knew the look in their eyes, the look of a predator, and me, their prey. Chapter 24. It was not looking good for me. If I tried to fly off that ship, I would be Draconed 10 different ways before I could get away. It was an eerie scene. I stood on the vast metal plane while over my head they hovered, a swarm of deadly predators. Then things got worse, a lot worse. It floated up into my vision like a dark moon, the blade ship of Visser 3. It hovered just a few hundred feet up. I felt my last reserves of courage beginning to fail. "Tobias, old buddy," I said to myself, "you are not going to get out of this alive." But they all just hovered there. Slowly, I began to realize the truth. They didn't know what to do about me. They couldn't just shoot me without hitting the ship. "Andalite!" The voice in my head made me reel. I almost took wing out of sheer fright. He had never spoken directly to me before. It was a voice of such absolute power, such utter confidence. The mere silent sound of it in your head makes you want to obey, makes you quiver and fear. It is the voice of dread, the voice of destruction. "Andalite, fool! Do you think I don't know who you are? A true bird would fly away." "Say nothing," I ordered myself. "Nothing." If I tried to reply, he might know me for a human. I would not tell him that. I would not give him anything. I closed my mind, but I could not shut out that dark voice. "Give yourself up, Andalite. I will grant you a quick and painless death, as soon as you tell me where the others are." I had seen what Visser 3 did to the Hork Bashir who displeased him. The memory was fresh in my mind.
Have it your way, Andalite. I am patient. I can wait here for as long as it takes. And then you will die. Quickly, by Dracon beam. Or perhaps, if we can snare you, more slowly, here in my blade ship. Much more slowly.
Just then, I heard another voice in my head. A very different voice. It was faint, as if it were far away.
Tobias? Tobias, can you hear me? Rachel! Yes, I can hear you! Tobias, we're trapped. The tank is full, but the grate won't open. Cassie and Jake have already morphed back to human, but they can't get it open. We're trapped in here. Rachel, what can I do? We can't get out, Rachel cried. Listen to me, Tobias. We're trapped. There's no way out. The ship will take off soon. They'll find us when they get to the mothership and unload the water. Tobias, we don't want to be taken alive.
My blood ran cold. My head was whirling.
What are you talking about? Listen, Tobias. We can't be taken alive. Do you understand? If there's anything you can do. Anything. Rachel, what can I do? I can't get you out of there. I know, Rachel said. We all know. But if there's just some way to... If the ship could just be destroyed. We know it probably isn't possible. Just if there's some way. No, no! I have to morph human. We'll tread water here. We have to be ready for when we get to the mothership. Then we'll morph into other animals and go down fighting. This can't be happening, I cried. This can't be happening. I guess Marco was right all along, Rachel said sadly. I guess it always was insane to think we could fight the Yeerks. Rachel, I never told you. You didn't have to, Tobias, she said. I knew. Goodbye.
She fell silent. In my mind, I could picture her regaining her human shape, treading water with the others, unable to escape, expecting only the worst, praying that I might find a way to make their end swift, as Visser 3 had offered to make mine. We had lost. The Yeerks had won, finally. And when we were gone, the last hope of the human race would die. Above me, the blade ship waited like a hawk watching a rabbit, ready to swoop down and finish me. Only I wasn't a rabbit. Visser 3 was a predator? Well, so was I. And I no longer had anything to be afraid of. If my friends were to die in the mothership, I would be lost and alone in a world where I belonged nowhere. I had nothing more to lose. Just then, I saw something that should have terrified me. Across the metal plane of the ship, they crawled and slithered toward me. All around me. Dozens of them. Giant worms. Centipedes with a hunger for living flesh. Taxons. They had come from inside the ship on Visser 3's orders. If I stayed put, they would catch me. If I flew, the hovering Yeerk ships would fry me. The taxons closed the circle around me.
It looks as if you have run out of time,
Visser 3 said in my head. He laughed. It was not a nice laugh. Ah, Visser 3, you ruthless predator, I thought. Very clever. You have me trapped. Trapped like a rabbit. But a trapped rabbit is one thing, and a trapped hawk, a hawk with the mind of a human being, is a whole different matter. The nearest taxon leveled a handheld Dracon beam at me. He watched me with two of the circular red globs they have for eyes. I pushed off with my feet. I beat the air with my wings. I flew straight for those red jello eyes. He raised one of his feeble forearms to shield his eyes. The wrong move. I trimmed a shade right, raked my talons forward and struck like I was hitting a mouse in a field. My talons closed around the Dracon beam. The taxon's weak grip was no match for my speed. The Dracon beam tore loose from his grip.
Get him!
Visser 3 cried. I could practically see the blade ship rock from the force of his rage. But I did not take to the air. I flew fast, but hugged the surface of the ship's metal curve. They could not hit me without hitting their precious ship. I knew just where I wanted to go. Wingtips actually hitting the ship on each downstroke, I raced toward the ship's bridge, toward the tiny windows where I had seen the Taxon crew. I could not save my friends, perhaps, but I could try to grant Rachel's last wish. I could try to bring the ship down, even if it meant the end of my friends. Chapter 25.
Take off! Move!
Visor 3 commanded the crew of the truck ship. Almost immediately, the huge thing began to move forward. Very slowly at first, but as it moved, it created a headwind. The bridge was moving away from me. The ship was rising as it went. 100 feet up now. 200.
Ha! Not so easy, Andalite.
Right then, I had a powerful urge to shock the evil monster and say, "Guess what, creep? Not an Andalite at all. The name is Tobias." But I wasn't ready to start bragging. The truth was, it was looking bad. The ship was slowly picking up speed. I flapped harder, harder. I gained again, but it was painfully slow. I was wearing out. The Dracon beam weighed me down. The headwind was building. Ahead of me, just a few feet away, I saw the bulge of the bridge. I gained a foot. Another. Another. I landed and folded my wings. I couldn't fly anymore, but I could still pull myself along with my talons, gripping the small edges and ridges that ran along the top of the ship's bridge. I was there. Below me, transparent plastic. I could see the crew on the bridge. Taxon stared wildly up at me. With one desperate lunge, I propelled myself into the air. I had to fly full force to stay ahead of the onrushing windows of the bridge. Then, with one sharp talon, I pulled the trigger on the Dracon beam.
Fry, you worms!
There was no recoil, not like a regular gun at all. But a beam of intense red light lanced from me to the bridge. It burned a hole through the window, sliced through a fat Taxon, and began slicing up control panels and instruments like a hot knife going through butter. I squeezed the trigger for as long as I could. At last, exhausted, I could do no more. The Dracon beam slipped from my talons and plunged toward the earth below. But I had done it. It was an incredible and terrible thing to see. The ship, as big as a skyscraper, vast beyond belief, shuddered as though it had hit a speed bump. Still it rose, sharply upward into the sky, as if it were a whale breaching. It aimed for space, its natural home, but it was clear that it was no longer under control. It rolled suddenly onto its side. A ball of orange flame! The out-of-control ship had smashed recklessly into one of the helicopters. The chopper fell in ruins. The bug fighters and the blade ship scurried quickly out of the way. But too late. Crunch! One of the bug fighters had slammed into the side of the ship. The bug fighter was finished. The blade ship and the remaining bug fighter withdrew quickly. And then I saw the hole. A tear 100 feet long had opened in the side of the truck ship. From the hole, the water of the lake gushed. It was a waterfall from the sky. Millions of gallons hemorrhaging out. "Oh boy," I whispered. We were maybe 700 feet up over the forest now when I saw them. Cassie first, then Rachel and Marco together, and Jake. They fell, fully human, from the torn side of the ship. They plummeted, helpless, doomed, to the uprushing ground. No! I knew there was nothing I could do. I knew it. But still, I hurtled after them. Hurtled with all my speed as they fell, arms flailing, mouths open in screams of terror. Chapter 26. They fell. But as they fell, they began to change. Cassie was the first. Leather sprouted from her skin. One of her morphs was an osprey, a distant cousin of the red tails. She fell, and as she fell, she became less and less of a human. Marco and Rachel both previously morphed bald eagles. Bald eagles are huge birds, much bigger than the red-tailed hawks. As I watched, long wings replaced their flailing arms. Jake had morphed a peregrine falcon. Peregrines are so fast they make red-tails look like they are standing still. As I watched, a peregrine's beak grew from Jake's mouth. Not enough time. Not enough time! They would hit the ground before... Shwoop! Cassie opened her wings and skimmed above the treetops. Marco barely made it. He fell down into the forest out of sight. I was sure he had been too late. But then, up from the trees floated a bird with a 6-foot wingspread and a proud white head. Yes! I cried. In the sky overhead, the huge truck ship stopped climbing. It rolled again, onto its back this time, then plunged back to the earth.
Man, that was way too close!
I heard Marco yell.
That does it. I have had it with this Animorph stuff.
You're not safe yet, I told him. Look! With the truck ship out of the way and falling to earth, the blade ship and the bug fighters came after us. Quick, into the trees, out of sight, I yelled. Like a well-trained fighter squadron, we swooped down into the forest, down below the tops of the trees, where the Yerks could no longer see us. An explosion like a bomb going off. The truck ship had hit the ground. The concussion rolled over us like a tidal wave of air. I rocketed into a tree, but was able to avoid being hurt. Everyone okay? I yelled. One by one, they said yes. But the explosion had disturbed every animal in the forest. The birds had all either hidden or flown away during the earlier fighting. Those few birds still left now took wing, startled. I saw her take off. The hawk. She was scared and wanted to run to the sky. But the sky was not a sanctuary for her. I don't know which ship fired the Dracon beam, whether it was the bug fighters or the blade ship. You see, they had a good long look at me, and she looked just like me. The Dracon beam sizzled, it burned off a wing, and she fell to earth, never to fly again. Chapter 27. The Yerk truck ship burned. What was left was eliminated by the Yerks. No evidence was left behind. No proof that we could show to the world. But we had destroyed it, and a bug fighter as well. And we had gotten out alive. Most of us. It was a day later when I went to see Rachel again. It was like she was expecting me. Hi, Tobias, she said. Come in, it's safe. I hopped through the window and flirted over to the dresser. How are you doing? She asked. I'm okay, I said. She looked unsure of what to say next. Look, Tobias, maybe this seems crazy, but Cassie and I were thinking, that maybe we'd go back up to the lake, try and find her body, the hawk, and at least bury her. No, that doesn't sound crazy, Rachel, I said softly. Not crazy at all, just human. She looked keenly at me. Well, we are human, all of us. Yes, I knew I was human when I realized how sad I was that she was killed. See, a hawk wouldn't care. If she had been my mate, I would have missed her, been disturbed. But sadness? That's a human emotion. I know it seems strange, but I guess only a human would really care that a bird had died. If you help us look, maybe we can still find her body. No, her body will be eaten by a raccoon or a wolf or another bird, maybe even another hawk. That's the way it is. That's the way it is for wild animals, Tobias, not humans. Yeah, I know. That's how I know that you are wrong, Rachel, at least partially. I am a human, yes, but I am also a hawk. I'm a predator who kills for food, and I'm also a human being who grieves over death. She looked terribly sad. She's very human,
my friend Rachel. I went to the window. It was a beautiful day outside. The sun was bright. The cumulus clouds advertised the thermals that would carry me effortlessly to the sky. I flew. I am Tobias, a boy, a hawk, some strange mix of the two. You know now why I can't tell you my last name, or where I live. But someday you may look up in the sky and see the silhouette of a large bird of prey. Some large bird with a rending beak and sharp, tearing talons. Some bird with vast wings outstretched to ride the thermals. Be happy for me, and for all who fly free. Chapter 1. My name is Cassie. I can't tell you my last name. I wish I could. But I can't even tell you what town I live in, or which state. We have to disguise our identities, we animorphs. It's not about being shy. It's about staying alive. If the Yeerks ever learn who we are, we'll be done for. If they don't kill us outright, they'll make us controllers. They'll force a Yeerk slug into our brains, where it will take control of us, making us slaves, tools of the Yeerk invasion of Earth. And I really don't like the idea of being under control of an alien. I don't like the idea of being dead, either. On the other hand, there are some things I do like about being an animorph. Some very cool things. Take the other night. It was late. I should have been in bed. Instead, I was in the barn, getting ready to turn into a squirrel. Technically, the barn is really the wildlife rehabilitation clinic. My dad is a vet. So is my mom, but she works at the gardens, this big zoo. The wildlife rehabilitation clinic is just my dad and me. We take in injured birds and animals and try to save them, then release them back into their natural habitats. That's where I was, in the barn, surrounded by dozens of cages of birds, from a mourning dove who'd run into a car windshield to a golden eagle who'd almost been electrocuted by a power line. In another part of the barn, we have bigger cages for the badgers and possums and skunks and deer, and even a pair of wolves who had been poisoned. At the other end, far from the wolves, we keep our own horses. There's an operating room and a couple of small recovery rooms, too. Back to that night. Have you ever watched a squirrel in the park? They are constantly alert, constantly